Guys, this is a quick tour of Xcode, and I would like to run through it with you now. Now that you have the foundation portion playlist that I uploaded full of the foundation of the language of Swift, now it's important for you to know how you can actually build your project in Xcode so you can make an app. So this is the starting point of that, and then we'll get into more specific apps later. So really quickly, we have Xcode. Whenever you click on Xcode, before we were going up to File at the top, New, and creating a new playground. Instead of making a playground, we are not just typing out some code just for the sake of testing things out and running things. We are actually trying to build an app. That's our intention. So we will actually go to File, New, Project, And here we go. And then we have this awesome screen here. Let's go ahead and make some room. Okay, so you get this menu here, and at the top of the menu, you can see what type of application it's in a selection of applications that you want to, type of applications that you would like to create, as well as a few different topics. So up at the top, we have iOS, we have Watch, we have tvOS, we have macOS, and cross-platform. Cross-platform obviously means that you can build an app that should work across all of the Apple platforms, the Mac, tvOS, Watch, and so on and so forth. And it will simply just shift itself based on you letting it know what it should do for which device. We're just going to focus on iOS for now. iOS and tvOS are pretty similar, depending on what you're trying to do, at least. But we're dealing with touches and taps and everything like that. So iOS is what we're going to deal with. There's so many different templates to start with, and these templates will help you be able to get started on your app really fast. One thing I will say is most of the time, I still to this day start with a single view application or a game. And hopefully I would like to move toward a tutorial series for games. I'd like to be kind of game focused on this channel to give answers to questions that people are looking for game development, specifically for iOS. But today's video isn't on games. It is on just getting a nice tour of Xcode. So I'm going to tap on single view application and hit next. And then this is where you actually name your project. You can name your project whatever you like. This would be my first project. And then you can choose a team. You will have nothing here if you are not signed into an Apple ID already. You can get to that Apple ID by going to Xcode and Preferences and Accounts. And this is where you could actually log into your personal account. This doesn't quite matter yet until you actually get a developer account. And at that point, you can then start to use that, utilize that. And this is what will help you actually publish your app later on down the road. So organization name, you can have a company here, organization identifier, that would also be company name. And this helps build a specific bundle identifier for when you're actually uploading it onto the App Store. So it has a very unique kind of identifier. Core data is used for saving data. Maybe in the future I'll have some courses on core data. This is how you save data physically to the device. Right now I'm not going to have that checked, so it's not going to give us any files to help us set that up. But you can always go back and add that later. It's best to add it in the beginning though, for my personal opinion. These last two here are unit tests, are for testing. And unit tests are something that you can run inside of your application to test that certain behaviors haven't changed. And if they do, then you need to go back and fix them. But it's great for being able to keep track of different things. It allows you to have more of a test-driven approach to building your applications. Maybe we'll tackle this a little bit later. That's unit test, that's more focused on the code, and then UI test is more focused on the UI, although UI can also be created programmatically. So I'm going to hit next. You have the option to select where you would like this project to be created. I'm going to choose my desktop for now. I would recommend making a folder in your documents if you haven't already. Right here we have source control, and you have the ability to create a Git repository. This Git repository I will review later. Is very important for being a professional developer. Allows you to make sure that you have multiple copies of your project. That way, if something goes wrong, you can always revert back to that or keep notes on things that you've changed in the past. If you're ever planning on working on a big team, this is super important. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and select desktop and hit create. And here we are. We're in our project now. And it has magically selected an iPhone 8 up at the top in the upper left-hand corner. But first off, what's going on the screen? We have 4 major areas sectioned off for ourselves. We have this top bar here, which has a play button. You could probably guess that is to test and play your application and make it run. Right next to that, well, this whole top area here is a toolbar that you can use to get to some of your quicker options. More of these I'm going to show you as we go along, but I just want you to know to control your sidebars here. You have these last 3 on the far end. That allows you to toggle your file system, your file hierarchy over here on the left-hand side, where you will keep track of all of your files. I usually like to close up these tests since I don't casually use them too often. But over here under the main folder, you're going to see an app delegate here and a view controller and main storyboard and all this other stuff. That's going to be a little confusing for you right now. Over on the left-hand side, we have that hierarchy, and the app delegate is a file that comes with your application. This deals with a lot of the things that are going on when the application starts. This file is in charge of setting some particular things up for your app when it runs at the very beginning. We won't deal in this area for a very long time, but you will need this area because this page of code tells your app to go to, tells your app where it needs to start, like what storyboard, which there's a storyboard file right here. And whichever storyboard and view controller has this little arrow on it, that means that that is the entry point that the app delegate is looking for. And so, speaking of storyboard, we have a file that came with our application called main.storyboard. Main.storyboard is a place where you can visually drag around your elements. Kind of like I was talking about in the previous videos where we operate off of a model view controller hierarchy. This plays into that. This is the view where you're actually manipulating things. You actually search through here and you can find buttons. Like there's a button right there. You click and drag it over. And this right here that we're looking at is a view controller. We could have gotten our own view controller by dragging and dropping it in, but it came with one, so I'm just using it. So you have a button here, and you can also create a label by dragging this label in. And you'll notice that there are some blue lines that help you guide where you would like that item to go. And then also, after you have created a view controller or set it up the way you want, it needs to tie in code. Right now, if we select the view controller by hitting that yellow dot up there at the top, you can go over to the inspector, which is the side menu here that can be toggled on and off by hitting that upper right hand corner button. Over the third button here, you can actually click on this. This is kind of the identity inspector, and the class that it is associated with. Remember, we went over classes. You can create your own classes. Classes associated with is just something called view controller. Now we have a file that came with our project called view controller. So if you click on view controller, we can see that there is a class here called view controller. And this is actually what that storyboard is tied up to. So anything we do here in the code is actually affecting, that has the potential to affect this view controller right here because it's tied in. We have identified it. Now, if we decided in the view controller file here to change the name, let's say I named this test view controller. Instead, if I went to main.storyboard, clicked on our view controller, this would no longer work. It wouldn't know what to communicate with. Matter of fact, it would most likely crash. But if I were to type in test view controller, as you can see, it automatically saw, hey, there is a class called view controller that I can see. It allows us to type that in and then hit return, and then boom, we have it selected now. And so I can toggle this button here in the kind of lower mid left hand corner. If you click on that, give yourself a little bit of room. You can also toggle this closed, and there is a 3-button menu at the top in the upper right hand corner, and the center button, when you click on that, whatever you click on, it should usually automatically select what it needs to. If it doesn't, don't fret. There are 4 little squares in the middle upper right hand corner. If you click on that, you'll go to recent files. You can actually select view controller, which is that file over there on the side. Now we are looking at our code right next to the storyboard. So once again, if you want to go back to just seeing one thing at a time, you can actually click on that button up there with the lines. That will only show you one thing at a time. You can select something else. But if you want to see 2 files at the same time, you can actually click on these 2 circles that are kind of merging with each other. And you can select a file you can go to recent, or you can go to manual here and go through the hierarchy until you get to what you're looking for, which in this case would be the main storyboard is what I want. Now, to connect a item to your code, or to link an item to your code, like this label, for example, all I would do is hold the control key and click over into the class. Now, before we do any of that, let's take a look at this class. This class is inheriting from something called UI view controller. We know that it's inheriting from it because when you use the colon here, you have the ability to put some other class or protocol or something there that you would like to inherit all of its features. Apple created a class called UI view controller. We can take a look at this by clicking on it and jumping to definition. Inside of here, we can actually look at, and there's a lot of stuff here, you can actually look at exactly what is contained within this custom class that Apple has created. Now, Apple created this UI view controller, and it inherits from another class they made called UI responder, NS coding, and UI content container. If we scroll down a little bit, remember we talked about an init method, which is called whenever you're creating an instance of a class. We'll get more into that. It's going to be really clear to you in a later video. But for right now, I would like you to use a lot of your skills that we've acquired throughout my playlist. If you've gone through that, you know how to read this page for the most part. You know that a class is an object and it has some properties inside of it. We have a var here, which is a view. So this class UI view has a view, And it has some other things in here. It has a function called load view, has some other functions and some more properties. So if you ever want to see what an object has, I'm going to use the arrow in the upper left-hand corner to go back. If you ever want to see what makes a class work that Apple had created, you can always command click on that class and jump to definition. This also works for anything that you personally create as well. So now if I go up to the second button in the first 3-button menu up top in the upper right hand corner, I can control click from my label into my project underneath the class, and I'm adding a property which is going to be an outlet of this button. It's a direct link to that not button but label. And so I can call this text label. I can hit return, and there we go. And now we have a property here, and it is called an Iboutlet because it is connected to a storyboard. And you can see that connection by hovering over the little dot here. Now I went a little fast on that one, so let's do the same thing with button, and I'm going to drag it below here. You'll see why in a second. Now up here we see outlet in this little menu. Outlet would just be a property, but we want, whenever we user taps on that button, we would want something to happen. We want to call an action. So this button needs to be a function, needs to be an action. So we can change this from being an outlet property to a action function. And so we will call this do something, or we'll call it change text. There we go. There's a couple of other options in here. Sender as an argument. Touch up inside. Touch up inside is the type of touch that's happening on the button. We probably won't review that. We usually leave this the way that it is, unless you're doing something a little bit more advanced. And even then, it's very rare that I end up touching the touches, unless I'm working on a video game. Even then, that's a totally different story. Argument sender, there are events that could trigger buttons, but usually you will rely on the user to actually tap on something, which is the sender, from what I understand, to invoke a button. So I'm going to hit connect here, and boom, as you can see, it structured a function for us, and it took the name, and there it is. You can actually see that it's connected. So I'm going to make this only one screen one more time, and let's take a look at this class here. Let's review some things. The thing that this class actually came with two functions. One was viewDidLoad, the other was didReceiveMemoryWarning. Typically, I remove this didReceiveMemoryWarning. If you're curious about it, you can always hold the Option key and click on it, and you can read about what it is. Anything Apple made usually has some documentation associated with it. I told you about how you could make documentation in one of the first videos, but I'm going to review that later as well. For now, I'm going to get rid of the didReceiveMemoryWarning, and viewDidLoad is something that, it's a method that gets called every time you load that view. And so inside of here is where you would put majority of your code. For now, we don't need to do anything with our code special inside the viewDidLoad. All we want to do is do something whenever that button has been pressed. Now, right now we have access to the text label, so maybe we can change the label by pressing on that button. And so maybe we can say, once again, the name of the label is text label. That's what we decide to label it or name it. So I can call text label, if I can spell text label, dot text. Now, first off, the reason why we couldn't do text label and then just hit equal sign and then type in what the text label is going to say is because text label is not a string. In our previous video, we talked about strings and how they were just words. Well, over here, notice that this is a property that is planning to be a UI label. UI label is, let's jump to definition, a class. It contains a view. And down here, it has some properties, like the label has some text, it has fonts, it has text color, all kinds of things that we could play with. There's a lot in here for a label. So there's a lot you can do with the label. For now, we're just going to change the text and maybe change the color. We can do that by calling text label dot text equals hi. And we can say text label dot color text color equal dot, we can say blue. Cool. All right, and for now, let's run the app and see what we get. So what happens when you run your app, it actually opens up a simulator of an iPhone, and you are able to test your app live. You don't have to use your own iPhone or anything like that. And you can decide which simulator you would like to use. In the upper left-hand corner, you can pick, like if we wanted to test this out in iPhone 10, we could do that. If we want to test it out somewhere else, we could totally do that. Back to the simulator. Here's our app. We've got our label, we've got our button. If I press this button, it now says hi, and it's changed the color to blue. Just that simple. So I hope that you enjoyed this tour that we went through, just kind of showing you a little bit of the hierarchy, where things are. If this was a little bit too fast, just stop it, go back and review the video a few times. I really encourage you to go through my Foundations playlist of the Swift 4 language. That way you can understand a little bit more what we're talking about in this video. But at the end of the day, this is your first steps. Hopefully this helped out a lot, and you're going to be on your way to building your apps from here. Anyway, take care. Thanks for watching.